Yeah, g'day everyone and welcome back to the TryPod Live with Winnie and Clarkey. We go live here all over social media within 15 minutes of the final game every single round. We break down all the games for you, how we saw it, and we talk about it from the angle of our best bets as well. So with that in mind, Winnie, let me welcome you, mate. How was your weekend?
Mate, a bit disappointed. I went 2-2, won the mixed matchup as well. But I just feel like I deserve better. I feel like I deserve better this season than 4-4. That's my opinion. People can argue, but I guess when one of your losing bets is the Eels, I liked the Eels with the line today, and I talked about how it was 9.5. I couldn't find a 10.5, so I went plus 4.5 first half, and the Eels are down 10 at the break and actually win the second half. So you're on the right side, but wrong execution. But you got to wear that. My other losing bet is the Finns, which I'm willing to admit I got wrong, but it's like your double-digit lead in the second half. And then the other wins, I've got unders in Warriors Roosters. It goes under half the total. I've got Titans as an underdog on Tuesday. They win by 20, and I go back to other losing bets this year, like Cronulla, been gangbusters ever since. But that's how it goes, I suppose, after 3 weeks. A long way to go yet.
Yeah, man, it's the way with the NRL. It's a long competition, but there's just so many highs and lows for teams, and trying to pick out when you think there's an obvious spot where a side's ready to respond. And man, I was fully with you with the Dolphins this round. That was a really sore point for me, actually. I thought they had multiple chances to win that. But we'll get into both. Exactly right, mate. We'll get into every single game, guys, for you in just 1 second. But before we do so, let us hear from the CEO of Top Sport, Mr. Tristan Merlehan.
No, sorry, mate. I haven't got anything from Tristan.
All right, well, let's give Tristan a shout out instead.
Yeah,
shout out to Tristan.
He's had a mixed weekend as well, I think, but doesn't always get me a clip on Sunday anymore, unfortunately. So right. We'll hear how they went for round 3 on Tuesday. But we start with the game we watched most recently? Talk about 100%. Teams not being the same week to week. I mean, were these really the same two teams? Manly flogged in New Zealand a week ago and then lose their best player. The Raiders win as a 12.5 point underdog against Brisbane. A week later, it's like a 60-point swing.
And you know what? I actually think this is one of those games where people probably weren't predicting a result this drastic, because if you were to bet at the line on Manly and you took a -6.5 and then you heard Turbo was out, you were probably a little bit nervous. And similarly, we were sitting on a Raiders plus 6.5 ticket, or rather I was, with my tip for this game, and I was feeling good about it. In the end, both lines were drastic there in any fashion. The Seagulls defeat the Raiders 40 points to 12. And my biggest takeaway from this one is simply that possession and completed sets win games of football. And I think it is really easy in this game to look at the Corey Horsburgh sin bin as the turning point. And no doubt that was certainly a huge contributing factor. But at the end of the day, the possession was already getting to a very lopsided point. And when you have someone like Cherry Evans on the other side, you are a ticking time bomb, in my opinion. And there were certainly some tough calls against the Raiders by the referee. But the reality is their fans are saying robbed online. It's not the case when you concede 40 points. And Manly are a side in recent times, to a lesser extent last year, but certainly in their 2 wins this year, that they've shown us if you give them quality possession, they will put you away and they will put you to the sword. You got to frustrate them. You got to try to make them force errors. You got to take some risks with the ball to disrupt their rhythm and fatigue them a little bit in attack. And if you don't, well, the proof's in the pudding. The Warriors loss and the Cowboys and Raiders wins is completely different styles of football side. On the Raiders, of course, I'm interested to see how they bounce back from this. Can Ricky get them to recover? It was a real quality start to their season, but we did see a different side to them tonight. Only sour piece to come out of this one for me, Winnie, is Taniela Paseka's injury. It does look serious, and I'm going to throw it out here. The Seagulls, rather, have one too many quality outside backs. I think Tommy Talau still needs to fit into this side somewhere. I think they're in a premiership window right now. But without Paseka and without replacing him with a middle forward, they're not. So in my opinion, Winnie, I actually think they should go out and look for a trade/loan deal with one of their outside backs for a middle forward to plug what is going to be a significant hole for them moving forward, mate. But that's all my notes from this game. How did you break it down?
Well, I'll address whether Manly's a contender at the end. I thought, first of all, it did make sense this game. The Bulldogs were clearly pretty tired. They had to play 2 straight games on a Sunday afternoon. I heard you say Canberra, but that was the Bulldogs, wasn't it? Wearing blue and white. Those blue and white jerseys on a Raiders team is an eyesore. I don't know about you. What can you say? It's the bullies of Brookvale again. I'm actually going to begin here. I started a little segment for fun, a little clip I was going to do on a Friday called Roast My Multi. Don't know if you saw this one, Clarkey, where people always send me their multis every week in DMs. What thoughts on this, Winnie? Thoughts on this? Like I'm somehow meant to bless the multi. And I'm usually really polite. And I thought, why don't I actually give everyone a piece of my mind? You know, the first multi I chose to roast actually won today at 30-1. So that was Benny Williamson, who is one of our hired guns, who gave us a best bet this week as well. His best bet didn't get up, but he had no trouble picking a 30-1. So he picked Fafita, David, and Bullymore both to score. And I said good luck with two bench forwards who got about half an hour game time each. Fafita scores pouncing on a loose ball that was dropped off a bomb. Bullymore does the same. I was adjusting my TV because I saw Bullymore do that twice in the space of 2 minutes. I'm like, what's going on? So they both scored the identical try. In fact, Bullymore has a double in the first half. Benny salutes at 31. And I knew this would happen if I roasted a few multis. I'll look foolish eventually. But the very first one in the first video, look, I actually feel partially responsible. Like I tempted the punting gods. They had to embarrass somebody. They chose me. I'll take it. That's maybe not even the wackiest part of the game. We saw Garrick, and it's a day after the birth of his first child, and he has 4 tries. Talk about home advantage again with Manly. They go from playing at Mount Smart to Brookie, and it's a 60-point swing. And it is really hard to believe we're seeing the same teams play. And I thought the Raiders benefited against an overconfident Brisbane, but then you had to feel that maybe Canberra was complacent. And you talked about Turbo being out. Did Canberra think, therefore, they didn't have to take Manly as seriously? You question whether the Horsburgh sin bin, that's an obvious turning point. Well, yeah, when it's 0-0 and he gets sin binned, and when he takes the field again, it's the scoring play for 24-0. I think justifiably you call it a massive turning point. And it's hard. When Manly get their tails up and the Sea Eagles have silver tails at that, they can look as good as anybody. But can Manly do it against contenders? I'm yet to be convinced. And no Paseka hurts a lot. I love the idea of trying to get out there and find replacement, but easier said than done. You know, no club really wants to part with quality middles because you do need depth as well through the season.
Yeah, that's it. You really need to be looking for like realistically a reserve grade player that you think can step up to the next level that is contracted.
Well, you need the Roosters to give up on the next generational prop because of his attitude or something, and just let you have it.
Very interesting stuff, mate. Let's go all the way back to Thursday night, the first game of the round, where the Melbourne Storm defeat the Penrith Panthers 30 points to 24. And my biggest takeaway from this is an unexpected result in 2 different ways for me. Now, coming in, I felt the Storm probably should win by double digits, given the revenge factor for the Storm and the fact they were coming off a bye and back at home. Now, during this game, Nathan Cleary goes down early. The Melbourne Storm, I believe they're up by double digits, and I think, okay, unfortunately for the Penrith Panthers, the blowout is coming here. It's okay. They'll lose 2 in a row, but we know they're still a quality side. But to their credit, and my God, they deserve it, they just didn't know when they would be. The Storm score in the 72nd minute, and I go, okay, well, there it is. Then they somehow, they find another way to score at the 75th minute or something, the Penrith Panthers, and give themselves a shot, just like they did in their Roosters loss. It's a team that consistently since the 2023 grand final, the Broncos game there, realistically, they do not know when they're beat. They are always there for the full 80 minutes, and it was really awesome to see that again. When I looked across the fence of the Storm, there weren't too many standouts, if I'm absolutely honest. They're my premier picks, though, so I am going to hold them to a higher standard than almost every other team in this competition. No Dylan Edwards, no Nathan Cleary for most of the game. Backup fullback ruled out. Third-string fullback option has never played a game of fullback at any professional level. It was in Ron Massey Cup 3rd Division only a fortnight ago. I did expect more from the Storm. And even Cameron Munster, who I had as their MVP with his 3 try assists, all from kicks. I don't think he had a particularly strong game because there was a lot of penalties and inconsistencies in there for him. So final point for me, I actually leave this game more impressed with the Penrith Panthers, but ultimately I do note that Storm take the 2 points, and that's all that matters at this stage of the year, mate. How did you see this one? Break it down for us.
Going into it, I was disappointed that we didn't get the grand final rematch with both sides at the peak of their powers because Edwards was going to be out. But it turned out to be such an awesome game regardless. And that's even after the Cleary head knock. It just goes to show this is the best sport on the planet. And to clarify, if Cleary's out after 5 minutes, it was only 6-0 Melbourne. But But you pretty
Okay.
much thought, yeah, like it was already a tall task. And shortly after that, it was 12-0 and 14-0. And I'm with you. I'm thinking Melbourne's going to have their way with Penrith tonight. It's just not going to be a fair fight. And actually, right at that moment, remember we had our 2 hired guns, which a lot of people have given us great feedback about. We're going to keep that going this year. We had 2 of our expert tipsters on this game. And you've got Benny Howard, 21-3 last year, or 20-3, and he's tipped Penrith under 18.5 points. And it's 14-0, and Cleary is out. And Matty the Undertaker, who tipped either team 1-12, has messaged me saying, I'm drawing dead 10 minutes in, and Benny Howard has an auto win. And I think that was a reverse jinx by the Undertaker, because after that point, Penrith scored no less than 5 tries with no Cleary, no Edwards. A Cole being asked to play primary playmaker was outstanding. But you talk about Jenkins. I thought Jenkins was class. It makes no sense, because when other teams lose continuity or have to put a rookie into a position, they're just so clunky. And yet Penrith doesn't miss a beat. And this is against Melbourne in Melbourne. Penrith plays so well, they hit the front in the second half. I mean, what about Brian Toto? I actually, if I could have any winger in the comp, I almost feel like you got to be wary with Toto. His body's been through so much. He's played so many big games. How much has he got left? He's an absolute monster out there. I'm not just talking about the couple of tries, but every carry was setting the tone for Penrith's sets to absolutely go blow for blow with the Storm. And you probably feel Melbourne would say they should have buried Penrith when they had the chance. And if anything, there'd be a little bit of disappointment in it out of the Storm. But there's probably a recognition too that the Panthers have just got the heart of a champion team. And that's a perfect example. There's no reason for Penrith to be near Melbourne. And, with that sort of application, Penrith would have beaten Roosters the week before. That's the only thing you can say, is that if they had chosen to turn up a different week, they'd be 2-1, not 1-2. But it still sort of reminds you that this Penrith team, when Cleary and Edwards come back in, how hard they are to beat.
I actually wonder, given the Roosters lost now, if we walk back a week, was it possible the Penrith Panthers were kind of in a look-ahead spot where they're like, okay, we've got a grand final rematch to attend to next week. Roosters are down. They got no one this game. Let's go out there and just breeze past them, just do the bare minimum, and let's look forward to the grand final match and put our eggs in that basket. It's potential when you look.
Because absolutely. And
yeah.
I'm trying to remember who in the comments, was it Chris in the comments, said that was the mother of all sandwich spots. If you want to go Vegas, Sharks, it's a huge game. Roosters, everybody's missing. It's a walk in the park. Melbourne, in Melbourne, grand final rematch. So if there was ever a game where a team would have a lull, we should have probably seen it. And then we could have, taken. And though we both liked that 20-point line, it just kept on climbing. And when it was 24, it was too late. But in hindsight, absolutely. And that's the fact that 27 weeks, a team cannot be up every week, not even a dynasty team.
Yeah, not even the 4-bye reigning premiers can do it, as we saw. Let's move on to game 2, mate, where the Warriors defeated the Sydney Roosters 14 points to 6. And look, my biggest takeaway from this game was it was a pretty poor game of rugby league with limited execution from both sides. Now, I expected the Warriors to win here with consecutive weeks at home. It was another home preparation without travel for them. But I wouldn't necessarily say the reasons I thought they would have resulted in any stronger of a performance from them. For the Roosters, basically what I broke down in our preview, guys, their last week, their effort there was very special, but very difficult to replicate that and consistently apply that. And that's why I said I am really confident on the Warriors this week. We didn't see the same levels of physicality and emotion from the Roosters in this game. And I don't have too many other takeaways for the Roosters. I think, they were probably a D+. Looking at their season snapshot, it was better than their opening game, and it was much worse than the game against the Panthers. I feel for the Warriors in this game, they have corrected the lateral left to right movement, which they constantly threw in their attack over in Las Vegas. Those last 2 rounds, I have corrected that, but now their spine's still not quite clicking, rather. We've got Chansical Klukstad, who's not really ball playing. He's getting huge meters. Their halves aren't clicking particularly well or excelling in different areas. You're not saying Metcalf's kicking game or Chanel Harris-Tavita's running game. And Egan has some great scoots to dummy half behind the forward pack, but because those halves aren't clicking and they don't have a ball-playing fullback, they're not really able to shift off those momentum plays from Wade Egan. So my final point is this Warriors side does have a lot of potential with the forward pack there, but I just think they haven't got the jigsaw pieces in the right spot particularly around their spine just yet. I would like to see Tamari Martin brought back in because I just felt every time he played last year when Sean Johnson was out, the Warriors had really good movement around the park. He controlled them and steered them really well. So I would like to see him come and get an opportunity, Winnie. What are your thoughts on that, and how do you see this game?
Yeah, you're still not convinced with the New Zealand attack, hey? And then we look at the Roosters and their halves are Sandon Smith and Chad Townsend. And yet, the total was as high as 53.5 for this game. I think when we previewed it, it was 49.5. It just kept climbing. I don't know, I guess because everyone saw both these teams sort of in shootouts the week before. They saw both these teams score 30 plus the week before and just assumed. But for me, this game had unders written all over it. So the best bet was under 24.5 first half. There was only one try apiece in the first 65 minutes, in fact. As Bitsy asked, how'd you guys go and where'd you post these tips? So, I mean, we put the summary in the description of the video, and we always say at the top 2 and 2 on best bets, won the mixed matchup. The bets are all shared in the first 5 minutes of the Tuesday preview pod, and then a summary I post in the TryPod group on Facebook. So really easy to find, really easy to follow us. And a great tip by you too, Clarkey. Just about your most confident tip of the week was New Zealand to win. And I was less convinced. I thought it was more 50-50, and I thought I was more right for the first hour. But it was the Waz who finished strong. I thought CNK, what you lose in sort of creativity and game breaking, he's still a player that brings a lot to the table and is repaying the faith of the one jersey. And I also thought a key to this game was Wade Egan, who gets through a lot of work defensively, but is also a crafty, deceptive 9. Good, strong win by New Zealand. Team that was written off, now suddenly they're 2-1.
Absolutely, mate. It was a game where realistically, I don't take too much from it. Like it was that poor that I'm happy to just say that was a game of footy and move on to the next game.
That it's a bit of an eyesore, but don't you love having unders when you watch a game like that? It
100%.
makes it a whole lot sweeter.
Yeah, and cheering unders is usually weird for me because you're watching footy and you want to be entertained. But in that game, yeah, we were literally like, just keep doing what you're doing, boys. This is good. Let's move on. Exactly right. Game 3, guys, also Friday night. Broncos defeat the Cowboys 26 points to 16. And my biggest takeaway here was it's an improvement for the Cowboys, don't get me wrong, but they are still so far off the mark in 2025 to where they need to be that something just isn't right there. And when I look across the fence to the Broncos, I don't think they played exceptionally well either. They were good without being great. I loved Payne Haas individually, and I also loved Adam Reynolds' control and composure in this one. And I thought that was the real difference to me. Reynolds' experience and his kicking game. Because I look at the first 20 minutes of this game, and to me, it seemed like it was all the Cowboys. They had momentum. They had a nice roll on, but they didn't quite have the players to execute and come up with the big moment to break through. And then once they lost that momentum and the Broncos scored first, you kind of felt their heads drop. That same energy was zapped out of them, and they didn't have the same intensity to what they were doing. Second half was much of the same. The Cowboys come out. It's an electric start. It was coming easy. Then fatigue sets in. And you've got to show a bit of grit, determination. You really got to dig in, and you really got to want it. And they almost just roll over. And it just seems that unless this Cowboys side steamrolls sides, which doesn't appear likely this year based on their 0-3 start, they're not prepared to fight hard enough because they've had some opportunities in rounds 2 and 3. And when it got tough, they just simply chopped their heads and they didn't do enough. I thought the Broncos' character was tested because of the Cowboys in patches playing quite well. And to the Broncos' credit, they met that challenge head on and they came out on top. So final point for me, Winnie. Obviously, I can't say the same for the Cowboys there. I leave this game somehow even more unconvinced that they have potential to turn this around because the effort just doesn't appear to be there for any significant period of time. It's there in small patches. When the going gets tough, the Cowboys, they jump out the window and quit, mate. Did you see this one in similar fashion?
This is a tough one because you did make that point too. The Cowboys were better than they have been the previous weeks. So it was a decent showing, but you're still 0-3. It's just it was a tough environment, a tough opponent, and Brisbane had been humbled the week before. So that was always going to be a really tough 2 points to fight for. I think it was really important the Cowboys didn't come down and get smoked. Just show some life. It is still going to be a long season. I wanted to see that response from the Cowboys last week in the home opener against Cronulla, but you saw something. And just on that note too, I think I spoke about going into round 3, lots of upsets round 2. would the bookies pull these lines a little lower? But there was no temptation. All these lines still seemed very generous. And I think all the big favourites failed to cover. You look at Brisbane, that line got as high as 18.5, but it was consensus 16, 17.5. We did the pod and they only win by 10. The Sharkies will get to that game. I think that's the next one. They just fall short of covering, like a line that also got as high as 18. Bulldogs didn't cover the line today, lose by the hook. And even Melbourne the night before, that line got to 9.5 and Melbourne only wins by 6. So, we like to reference our mate Joe, who we appreciate him tuning in each week. Probably not the best week for Joe. Brisbane needed to get this win, and I actually thought Brisbane was under a lot of pressure in the first 20, where it was all North Queensland. But the key was Brisbane didn't crack. And then when Brisbane got an opportunity, Reynolds has a hand in a couple of tries, and Brisbane's got a comfortable halftime lead. However, when the Cowboys struck back, you're thinking it's game on until really on the back of Payne Haas, just rolling people. And I've said for probably 3 years, Haas is the best prop in the world. I know that feels like a really obvious statement, but I had people even last year saying, Fisher Harris is a better prop than Haas. And I just said, I couldn't see it. I can't see anyone who you can really tell me impacts the game as much as this guy, because I've seen Haas do it on Broncos teams that are second best as well. He hasn't been on a true contender the whole way along. But when this Brisbane team gets going and you've got multiple threats to worry about, you got Reynolds right side of the ruck, Hunt left, and then you've got to worry about the middle too that has Haas and Carrigan in there. It was too much for the Cowboys to handle. In fact, remember we talked about mega deals when Brown signed. Haas was the only forward I would actually consider signing on some sort of mega deal. And so Brisbane gets the result they wanted. It wasn't too pretty, but I actually think Madge will have been happy the fact that his team got tested and came out on top. As for the Cows, there's no moral victories, but at least showing some life, although they are one of the 3 teams that remains winless.
Yeah, I think Madge would have enjoyed that. I think he really would have enjoyed that win because it didn't come easy like it did in round 1. So it's the first Broncos victory he's got as a coach where they've had to play his style, which is tough, gritty, and durable. So I think he would have really enjoyed that one, mate. Let's move over to Saturday, Game 4. Sharkies defeat the Rabbitohs 27 points to 12. And my biggest takeaway here, and it's weird to criticise the Sharks, but again, I do hold them in a higher category than a lot of teams, so keep that in mind. I just felt they were missing that killer instinct here. The Bunnies were in shambles. They moved their halfback to lock. They had some injuries. They were jigging their lineup, and they were 20-0 at halftime. And I just felt that, realistically, with the fatigue setting in on a hot Saturday afternoon at home, that could have climbed to 50-0 on the second half, particularly when you consider that the Rabbitohs forward pack was fatigued heavily. But somehow, to the South's credit, and also a touch of criticism toward the Sharks, the second half was so much closer than I anticipated. I really expected a big blowout here. I think, based on the Sharks' lack of success in the finals in recent years and in big games as well, we can look at this and really narrow in and say, they're missing their killer instinct. And it is a big factor. Don't get me wrong. But I do want to offer this as well, a different perspective. It's only round 3. And when I look at the Sharks' past seasons, they have a bit of a pacing issue. Now, they had a pacing issue in this game throughout the 80 minutes, of course. They played so well for 40. The next 40 was no good. But they've had a pacing issue throughout their seasons in the last 2 years. And what I mean by that is they play their best footy during the season, but they don't build up and climb towards the finals. So by the time finals rolls around, they've got some patchy form. They're not at their best. Nico Hines' form has started to drop. And I think as strange as this might sound, they got the 2 competition points. That's all that ultimately matters. Maybe this is better for the Sharkies if they're not playing their best footy this early in the year and we actually see them build and climb towards the finals this year, because that would be a big point difference as to why they could do something different in the finals this year. Final point for me, though, winning not one Rabbitohs forward near the 100-metre mark, and I think that suggests that the fatigue factor of their opening fortnight, they did have a tough opening fortnight where they fought really hard for 2 victories, and I believe you suggested as much in the preview show as well there, mate. So break this one down for us. How did you see it?
Yeah, well, firstly, I'd actually say tough beat for anyone that laid the points with Cronulla, because whether you did lay 15.5 and you win by 15 ultimately, at 16.5, 17.5, 18.5, I saw close to kickoff. When you are on that favourite and they get beyond a converted try past that line, then you should be safe. And it was 26-0 and only one side really looking threatening. I mean, especially when you get the back-breaking moments. The moment of the game for mine, and there were a couple of special tries by the Sharkies, but what about, it's already 16-0. You could argue it's already game over. The Souths are actually on the attack, and Cody Walker appears to wait a perfect little dab kick over the line into the in goal. Mulatalo doesn't just die with it. He beats 4 defenders, breaks into open field, and sets up a try, a 100-meter try to Kennedy, ultimately the other way. At 20-0 after that try, it was game over then and there. And it really was just a gap in class. Though if you backed Bennett's boys with the start, and in the comments, a lot of people saying, how is Souths that are 2-0 catching, 16 and a half? You get the last 2 tries of this game, you get that backdoor cover. So you'll be very happy about the backdoor on Saturday.
And the backdoor literally came, as you said. The Sharks were almost 24-0. They'd scored in the corner. It was disallowed. And that's what, kept it at, I guess, 20-0 at halftime and gave the Rabbit as a chance to cover that line. But, yeah, either way, a fun game of footy, but nothing too significant to come out of it. This next game is an unfortunate one to preview because it lost me Clarkey's Collect for our podcast followers. And on a personal note, I did include the Dolphins in pretty much all my multis this round, to be honest with you guys. I was so confident to get the job done, but they fall short. The Tigers defeat them in Redcliffe, 30 points to 18. And my biggest takeaway, Winnie, I know you don't want to hear this, but it is when Wayne Bennett leaves a club, and I know it's overplayed, but it's overplayed for a reason. This Dolphins side just has zero confidence without their main man there. Even in front by 6, I don't think they ever looked comfortable or felt comfortable. And what they did was they slowly but surely let the Tigers climb back into the game. Because they were showing zero confidence and not looking to close this game out, they never fully shut the door. They never advanced their leading position. And so the Tigers, they actually built in belief because it was always there within reach. And the door was open. They didn't shut it. And ultimately, the Tigers come over the top late. For the Dolphins, let me say this. Mentally weak. Second best in contact. Stupid penalties. There was an opportunity to go up by 8 with a penalty 20 metres in front. They reject that shot and knock it on the first tackle. Completely unacceptable. But one down by 4, and after 2 repeat sets up on the Tigers line, they go for a conversion and make it to go up by 6. And that was a shot that was out wide. It was not in front. So I just think that completely lacks IQ. And I know, guys, I'm a fan of the game, but I don't understand what was the decision there from the Dolphins leaders or coaching staff. That just does not pass the pub test for me, guys. And I want to go there on leaders now at the Dolphins. I think they're a little bit thin in that capacity, having lost someone like Jesse Bromwich and Wayne Bennett. Yes, Tom Gilbert leads by example. He leads the tackle count every week. He's there on the big moments. But screaming in your opposition's face when they make an error, that's not captaincy. We don't see Cameron Smith do that, right? He didn't inspire this team at all. And I just think with an 0-3 start, whilst Tommy Gilbert is a bona fide rep player, he's an elite forward in this competition. I bloody love watching him play. His captaincy credentials do have to come under the microscope. And as a final point, I had an interesting one here. I have thought the Hammer looks disinterested in the first games we've seen from the Dolphins this year. He doesn't look sure of himself at fullback anymore. He's not going for big plays, whereas Herbie Farnworth at centre is making huge meters every game, and we know he has a desire to play fullback one day. Now, typically, I'd say in the past, let's get Trey Fuller into fullback, but do the Dolphins experiment Herbie at fullback and put Hammer back to the centre where we know he's comfortable as well? I'd like to see them tinker with something, Winnie, something small, but something to maybe shift the mindset, to get a bit of confidence back in this team, mate. But ultimately, I know this game was a sore point for you personally and for the pod, mate. So let it go, mate. Let it rip. How do you see this one?
Can we get Farlongo from Melbourne, and then I'll happily shift Hammer to centre, and then you got the best centre combo in the comp. And I don't know how Farlongo is not playing first grade. But back to this game, best bet, Dolphins, just to win, $1.85. And good start. Like the Dolphins turned up at home, looked much better with the ball than they had so far this season. Up 12-6 at halftime. Thought it was a pretty fair reflection. And what I'm looking for is that man, the Hammer, as well as Herbie, to lead them to victory in the second half, because those guys are at their best. Herbie breaking tackles of tired defenders. Hammer taking advantage of the gaps that open up when fatigue's in the game. But, of course, as we know, it was the Tigers who won the final 18 minutes, 18-0. They were the team that was hungrier, but also the fitter team. You know, the Dolphins have got a fast, mobile pack. But you really have to question the fitness of this team, because you go back to round 1, that game's in the balance late against Souths, and the Dolphins can't come up with the winning plays. And here, I felt we were gone at 18-0. I felt good earlier when at one stage it was 16-6. Of course, you feel great, as I said at the start of the show, that you get a favourite. They actually closed a shorter favourite, like 2.5-point fave. 16-6, second half lead, feeling fine there, but you've got to kill the game off when you're on top. And you give credit to the Tigers. The Tigers of old wouldn't stay calm and composed in a period like that, but these Tigers did, sort of doing to the Dolphins what the Knights did to West. If you recall, round one, the Knights were down 8-0 for 50 minutes, but didn't panic and came over the top strong. And that's sort of like West here. And I was also perplexed. Why don't you take the 2 when you're up 6, go up 8? And maybe then when West did level the score at 18-all, well, it wouldn't have been level, and maybe the Dolphins could have felt was still in front. As soon as it was 18-all, the Dolphins feel like, we thought we already had this game won. We got to go out and win it again. It's level pegging again. And the Dolphins were rattled. As I said, I had no confidence, and I don't regret the tip, but there's not a person in the country who tipped to the Tigers or backed the Tigers who's going to regret their tip or say they were wrong. They won by 12 ultimately. So you take your hat off. You have to admit this is a new Tigers team that has an additional level of confidence for a reason too, because there's more playmakers there now. Galvin's a year older. The spotlight's not all on him. Coruscant has options and weapons at his disposal. Obviously, Luai's there. And Taruva, you get a premiership winning winger and he's scoring every week. And this means that the team has the confidence to hang tough. Don't give up the soft tries, because you never know when the pendulum swings back our way, we can do something with it. And West did that. And buried the best bet. And unfortunately, as the hammer was held in check very well by West, that did cost Benny his best bet as well. But Benny will be fine. As I said, he hit his 30-1 multi after I roasted it, no less. And speaking of our experts coming in, they went 2-2 across the 4 boys, because in the next game, which you'll be much more happy to speak about, Padonis was on the money alongside the pod, loving your Titans as his best bet.
Yeah, mate, let's go straight there. Game 6, Titans defeat the Knights 26-6. Biggest takeaway for me was the Knights were not without opportunity in this game. They 100% had their fair share of field possession, but they just didn't execute to the right standard with their new spine. And coming into this game, we knew they were light on forwards, and that's where I thought they might struggle around their momentum and how much field positioning they can get. But to their credit, they got down the other end regularly. Their outside backs came in, they did a great job, and they just weren't able to convert those opportunities in that field position that they did have. Now, I'm cautious to wrap my Titans too much, but you could certainly tell that the Titans went back to the drawing board last week and really worked on their defense. Technically, it wasn't perfect. They actually missed more tackles and had more ineffective tackles than the Knights, but they did scramble and they had that desire for one another to turn up on their own line and try to shut down those Knights' opportunities, and did a really good job of that. So it was pleasing to see that from a Titans fan perspective. Final point for me, Winnie, I suppose, is you look at both of the spines in this game, and they're relatively new with playing with each other in the Knights and the Titans spine. They haven't had those combinations for too long. But when the Titans came out on top, you do have to give credit to their forward pack as well. That was where we thought the game might be won and lost. When the Titans did have ascendancy, their forwards really made sure of it in offense. Defensively, I was saying the Knights did get down the other end a fair bit, but on offense, the Titans forward pack was awesome for them there. And final point for me here is that the Knights have the bye this round. I think it's a perfect time for them to go back to the drawing board and ultimately see what's going to work for them, just like the Titans did last round, and come out the other side, rebound with a win. So I think they can still be a threat to most sides on their night, but the Knights certainly had an off night from what I saw, mate. Did you see it similarly?
Yeah, the Knights turned up to play early. It was sort of similar to the Cowboys game, where the Knights physically were in the battle, first 20, had opportunities, went close a couple of times, but the Titans were the polar opposite to last week, impenetrable. And look, I was on Titans for a best bet in this game. The Titans won us the mixed matchup, I should say. The mixed matchup was, Dolphins to outscore Knights. And the Dolphins stopped scoring with half an hour to go and only put on 18, which was a little under par. But the Knights only get 1 try, so we got home pretty easy there, and there's a $2.30 winner. So I should be happy, right? But I can't help but think, if you talk about, the losing best bets this year, well, a week ago I had unders in Titans Dogs, and it's like, the Titans are the worst defense you've ever seen. It's 20-0 after 20 minutes. And then this week, the Titans let in 1 try the whole game. The Dogs let in 8 points the whole game. They both were awesome defensively, and the Dogs played the ugliest, scrappiest game you've ever seen. And the Titans were in control, but also again went way under the total. But then again, I can't complain about bipolar performances, because you're sort of also trying to look for that when you're finding value and understanding that these teams don't perform in a straight line. So anyway, after Newcastle gets turned away for 20, momentum does swing. The Titans, with running threats everywhere, took advantage of the game. It was still, 12-0. You feel a Knights side that we know was undermanned, but you've always got that class there. And if the Knights can come up with a play, you never know. But it never happened for Newcastle. And then the Titans added a couple more tries, both back rowers crossing within a few minutes, which was great for Benny. As I said, first leg of his multi. Titans get the big win, and the mixed matchup gets home easily as well.
And in terms of Dave Fafita's try in particular, that is the least destructive try I've ever seen from Dave. He just pounced on a ball, so that was awesome work for him to be there for that. Let's move on to the last game we've actually got here, which is the Bulldogs and the Eels game. Doggies get up 16 points to 8. And my biggest takeaway here, Winnie, and I don't want to be too critical of Dylan Brown throughout this review, but I kind of have to be in some ways. So I felt the Eels side was crying out for someone to stand up, take control. And we know in a full-strength Eels side, that's going to be Mitchell Moses. But in his absence over the past 2 seasons, besides Clint Gutherson, who they've moved on, no one else has been able to step up. And I just felt they had multiple opportunities to either sustain some pressure on the Doggies line or come up with a match-winning play. Instead, they fumble and bumble their way to the 79th minute mark, and you think, okay, well, they're going to have one last shot at the roll of the dice here. They've got to go 100 metres, and they give away an obvious penalty, which was just a low IQ play to remove any chance they had of scoring, converting, and levelling there. Now, fatigue did play a considerable factor in this game. Both sides were low on points, particularly in the second half. But even though fatigue's there, you still got to have some composure. And let's call it how it is. The Eels' spine is largely inexperienced in Hawkins, Iongi, and at the time it was Riley Smith on the field. And I know Dylan Brown's not a halfback yet, and therefore, you're not 100% expecting him to come up with the big plays. But he is $1 million playmaker right now. Now, I'm not going to, pay out on the Knights deal or anything like that. Like, just right now with the Eels, he's $1 million playmaker. With 13 minutes to go, the Bulldogs were gassed. They had 1 interchange left. In that time, the Eels had 3 interchanges left. They roll 3 fresh forwards onto the field. And the first thing Dylan Brown does is come up with an error early in the set, forcing a pass to Sean Lane. So I don't want to be overly negative or single out one player, but just put simply, I thought that wasn't up to scratch from $1 million playmaker when the side needed someone to step up. And we saw other players step up this round. Adam Reynolds, for example, DCE for the Sea Eagles. We've seen other halves step up and take control in the big moments of games. No one from the Eels was able to do that. But my final point is actually towards the Doggies. They start the season 3-0. The last time they did that was in 2012, and they did go on to make the grand final that year. So it's been a gritty and tough start to the year. My only concern, Winnie, is if that trend continues, do they run low on gas late in the year like we saw last season? Because there have been 3 really hard-fought victories, mate. Break down the final game for us. How did you see it, though?
It's one I said at the top is right side, wrong choice. I wanted to be on Parramatta, but I chose first half. So sometimes that's going to burn you when you actually won't cover the first half, but you would have just covered the line. And I talked about how they're close bets, 4.5 for a half, 9.5 for a game. If I get a 10, I'm taking the full line. And I tried, and I just couldn't find one. Sorry, guys. And then, of course, we don't get the first half cover. Para doing virtually nothing in attack, while the Dogs. Well, the first thing is that you lose the first half by 10, and Parramatta's winless and at home and should be desperate. And that first try to Saluka Fafita is a prop turned inside. I know that Lane was maybe trying to milk an obstruction, but then you've got to have the footy IQ to at least plead your case to the ref, not just drop your head when you don't lay a finger on the ball carrier. So that soft try is ultimately why we don't cover the first half, maybe why Para doesn't win. I will say I want to give credit to the Bulldogs because when you win when you're not at your best, that is a testament of a quality team. Didn't miss Birdo too much with a couple of nice finishes out wide. They were nice tries by the Dogs. think they might have both occurred on last play too, where the defense. I always think running it on last and getting it out wide is always a great option because the fullback's never in the defensive line and the winger may be dropping back, hedging his bets for a kick, and sometimes you can just strip a team for numbers. And the Bulldogs did that nicely. So the Bulldogs had 3 tries in the first half. We still nearly got the miracle cover. Did you see this moment, Clarkey, the misconduct call on Josh Curran? So we're down 10. We've got plus 4.5. But the Dogs have got the ball inside 3 minutes to go in the first half, coming off their own line. And the Dogs are going nowhere. And then Wilson actually makes like a 15, 20-minute break. And the ref blows a penalty. And you're thinking, oh, did they get him high? And what had happened was Curran, who is still getting back on side, yells to an Eels defender, "You're offside, you're offside." And the Eels defender thinks it's the ref in his ear, pulls out of the tackle. I've never seen that before. So anyway, penalty Para. If we score a try there, we cover the first half line. But no, Para threw it over the sideline. Never mind. Actually, after that, then Lomax got the ball in a kick return, did a chip and chase. It ended in the in goal, and it was saved as well. So then we go to a very ugly second half. Lomax, I did want to mention, he had 30 hit-ups, so he was trying his best. But I want to end there on the Eels halves. The ball went to Hawkins every time when a decisive play was required, and Hawkins was no threat. Now, if you are somebody out there who said Brown is nowhere near worth $1.3 million a season and a 10-year deal, and it's the worst deal of all time, you've got to be feeling pretty good. Going into round 1, when Para had to play the Storm without Moses, I heard these pundits on like 360 going, oh, well, this is a real opportunity for Dylan Brown to prove he's $1 million man. He needs to go in and beat Melbourne. And I was like, that's ridiculous. You're setting him like a way too unfair bar. Like, he doesn't need to go and beat Melbourne with this ragtag Eels team to prove himself. But you know what? He sort of does need to beat somebody. Like, they just got flogged by the Tigers, and they were crying out for a playmaker to step up. And somebody else was at me in the comments before, a few people coming at me, which is fine. I'm very much used to it. But someone, is bringing up that I picked Eels top 4. And I have to cop it when I get it wrong. But I also said my pick for the Dally M this year was Mitch Moses. I didn't know he wasn't going to play the first 10 weeks. And, the Eels win this game with Moses, right? The Dogs were there for the pick, there for the taking. The Dogs were gassed. This game was a lot like Dolphins-Tigers. The Dogs were begging to give it away. We give the 10, 6-point lead away in the second half. The difference is the Tigers had the tenacity and the class to actually come back and take it. The Eels did not. So the Eels can only blame themselves because that game was there to be won for Para. When the Dogs were up 6, I was saying next try wins. If the Dogs score again, they'll probably hang on. But if Para scores next, Para will win. And while Para did cover, which is just a slap to my face because I get a losing best bet because I took first half, Para should have covered at a minimum. Para should not still be winless.
Definitely. We saw Zach Lomax move back to the wing for most of this game. You're right. He had 30 runs of the ball, almost 300 meters. When the winger is the one trying to come up with the match-winning plays in the halves arm, there's something terribly wrong with the side. And there was something terribly wrong with the Eels again today. Thank you so much for being here with us, guys. That is all 8 games recap for you all. Hey, Josh Curran's actions today, they might not have been in the true spirit of the game, but here at the podcast, we're always in the true spirit of the game. So thank you so much for joining us. Tuesday, 5:30 p.m. New South Wales time. We'll be back to preview round 4 and give you our best bets again. So thank you so much, Winnie, and over to you for the final word.
Mate, I respected what Curran did. I thought it was that sneaky and sort of like evil genius, but I also appreciated that the ref picked it and gave a penalty because you can't be doing that. Not every sport the referee gives instructions to players, because I've often thought, why does the ref have to say don't hit him late, don't go early? Don't the players know the rules? But I kind of actually appreciate that the ref coaches players through games to help it flow. So, hey, nice try, Curran. We can appreciate a little bit of hustle. Plenty of talk about, how we're going this year. And my performance, I think if I sustain this, we'll have more wins than losses. And at least the mixed matchups reflected that, even if 4 best bets so far have not. We'll be back on Tuesday trying to win a few of what's on your jersey. Clarkey, I don't know if you can stand up and show people what we can hopefully win a few of. Oh, that's great. It's a home jersey. Milwaukee, I thought it said Bucks on the front. But anyway, we'll be back Tuesday. And with the hired guns, they're going to be here all season long. We appreciated their input this week, as a lot of the audience did, which is awesome. So I'm glad that that's an innovation and a welcome addition that we can carry on and go strong. And a couple of the boys already have their nose in front of me too, because I won't count the mixed matchups in sort of my profit per unit compared to the other boys who are sharing like one tip a week either. So as I said, the boys that got registered a win this week, they're already got their nose in front for the season, which I think is going to be a great one, guys. And we appreciate everyone who's along for the ride with us. See you next Tuesday. Lego.